this Saturday is actually a special day for Mandy and I. It is our 17th wedding anniversary. So our marriage is almost old. Thank you. Appreciate that. So our marriage is almost old enough to vote. So we're excited about that. But I married my wife for just a ton of different reasons. I mean, I could stand up here and list them all for you, and we're going to do that right now. No, I'm kidding. But one of the smaller reasons why I married my wife, amongst the millions of various reasons as to why I did, is that my wife is about as low maintenance a woman as there has ever been on God's green earth. And what I mean by that is on her birthday, several years ago, I asked her, hey, we're going to go anywhere you want to go for your birthday. Whatever restaurant you want to go to, we're going to go to. We're going to make it happen. Expecting her to say, like, a really high-end Italian place or something along those lines, and instead she said, I want to go to the Burger Barge, which if you don't know what the Burger Barge is, it's a restaurant in Peoria, Illinois, and you might walk in, you might think, this place looks like it's been shut down by the FDA, because it's been shut down by the FDA a few times. They actually get seagulls that walk in on their porch and come into the kitchen. It's wild, but they make great burgers. But she wanted to go to the Burger Barge. This past year, just for Mother's Day, a few weeks back, I asked her, hey, where do you want to go for lunch? You're in charge. It's Mom's Day. Pick wherever you want to go eat. And she said, I want to go to Skyline. I love that woman. She is about as low maintenance as it could possibly be. And I don't know that this shows up anywhere quite as well as when it comes to her choices for lunches during the week. Both Mandy and I, like millions of other people, we bring our lunches to work because, we're cheap. But Mandy's lunches seem to be similar frequently. For months on end, my wife will eat the exact same lunch over and over and over again. Every week we make up what our grocery list is, and I'll ask her, hey, what do you want for your lunches this week? And she'll tell me the same thing that she told me last week. And okay. And they're always really, really simple. Like for probably 2-3 months, it was, I want a pre-mixed salad and I want a little side of chicken salad to go with it. And then I asked for the next week, I want a pre-mixed salad and a side. It got to the point that whenever we went grocery shopping, I just instinctively went to go where her chicken salad that she likes is, because I knew that was what she was going to want. And then when she finally did change it up, what do you want for lunch this week? I want broccoli and smoked sausage. And that's it. My wife could be content to eat the exact same meal every single day for the rest of her life and never once complain about it, and in fact, be pretty excited about it when it comes along. I am not that way. I am a fancy boy who likes fancy meals. I'll usually make one particular lunch, and that'll be my lunch for the week, but by the time we hit Friday, I am far less excited to eat it than I was on Tuesday. Tuesday, I'm all kinds of hyped up about it. By Friday, it's like, can I just do something else? And my lunches are far and away way more complicated and complex than my wife's. Again, I am a fancy boy who likes a fancy meal. To give you an idea of what some of my meals are like, recently I had smoked pork tenderloin sandwiches on a brioche bun with crispy onions. There was the smoked beef sandwiches on ciabatta bread with provolone, spinach, and sautéed onions. Don't you hate it when I talk about food before lunch? This week, though, it was pulled pork mac and cheese with crispy jalapenos on top. And there is a reason I am the size that I am. But as great as that lunch was, by the time we hit Friday, I was ready for something else. I just was. And it's honestly to the point that if you told me I had to go ahead and make the same thing this week, I might eat it, but you're going to hear about it an awful lot. Which, frankly, is one of the most American things that I think I could possibly ever complain about, right? I mean, the idea that we are in a blessed society and I am blessed enough to be able to have a lunch every single day, that should be enough for me, but yet I will still find things to complain about those sort of things. We are in an incredibly blessed society, and I know right now it may not feel as great as it has maybe for the last 40 years or so, but we are still far and away better than some of the other cultures that are in the world around us today. And in fact, if we want to take a further step back and we want to look, we live in a blessed place in human history. Like there's something about this that you've probably never considered before. But the average lower class American citizen will lead a far more luxurious and a far less stress-free lifestyle than King Henry VIII. We tend to think about kings and queens of that particular time of living a life of decadence and luxury and never having a single problem in the world. But King Henry VIII never had air conditioning. He didn't have indoor plumbing. He didn't have access to good medical treatment. I mean, he was in an age where the medical treatment was throw some leeches on you and see what happens. In fact, King Henry VIII lived to only be about 55 years old, whereas the average American will live to be 79 to 82 years old. Chances are better than good that you will lead a life that is longer, healthier, and far more luxurious than one of the most well-known rulers in all of human history. That your life, by comparison, is better than a king. But we don't ever think about that, do we? And nowhere does that show up more than in America's favorite pastime. And I ain't talking about baseball. We complain about absolutely everything under the sun, don't we? Now, some of our complaining, it feels somewhat justifiable. I mean, $5 for a gallon of gas is ludicrous. But most of the time, we complain about things that are trivial. We complain about things that are luxuries. We complain about things that, if we really want to call them what they are blessings. When the line at McDonald's doesn't move quite as fast as we think it ought to. When the person who's in the same grocery aisle as us is parked out right in front of the only item that we came here to get. And they won't move. When the person in the car in front of us is driving a whole 2 miles an hour slower than we think they ought to. We gripe, we complain, we throw a fit, we get angry. The reality is that those things are blessings. Because in the whole of human history, the cars that we have now are far more luxurious, they are far more fast, they are better modes of transportation than even just 100 years ago. Right? Even at 2 miles slower than you want to, you're still going to get there way faster than they could in 1850. We don't think about how convenient and how nice it is to be able to get any sort of food from around the world within just a couple miles from our home. We don't consider it much of a blessing to be able to wait in line to have a meal readily made for us in under 5 minutes. Last week we said that when something becomes ordinary to us, it's no longer thought as being miraculous. And I would also say that once a blessing is considered to be routine or part of the ordinary, we'll find something to complain about it. Once something shifts itself from being a blessing to being something that is part of our everyday lives, when it is minorly inconvenient for us, we'll complain about that. When something small takes place to disrupt that blessing, we whine. Which is, frankly, exactly the same thing that the Hebrews did during their journey to the Promised Land in the passages that we're going to be looking at today. We're going to find ourselves kind of covering a lot of ground today, but again, stay with me. I promise we're going to get through it all. We're going to be going through Exodus chapter 15 through 17, but we're also going to fast forward a little bit in the narrative and hit Numbers 11 today. So be ready to turn there once we get to that point. We're not going to be in Numbers 11 very long. Again, the series is called Exodus, though there is one sermon coming up where it's all Numbers, so, you know. Still all part of the same journey, everybody, I promise. So, But here at the outset, I think we could all probably agree that based on everything that we have talked about, that the Hebrews have experienced in the last few weeks, They should be the very last people in the world to complain about absolutely anything. Right? They have got to see God move in ways that I would willingly sacrifice my left arm for to just see a third of. And they've gotten to see it all within the span of a few weeks. They got to watch as God hit Egypt with various plagues in order to finally convince Pharaoh to do something that generations of Hebrews did not get to see, and that was their liberation from Egypt entirely. They were the first generation in 400 years to be able to walk out of Egypt because of what God did for them. They got to see the waters of the Red Sea parted to walk on dry ground below that. Still wild to me. It spends hundreds, if not thousands of years underwater, and somehow it is immediately dry. They got to see as God wiped out the Egyptian army with no more than a thought, by simply bringing the waters back in on them, to not only liberate them from the Egyptians entirely, but to watch as their greatest enemy is taken out. The most powerful army in the world at that point, gone because of what God did. And if that wasn't enough, now they are making their way to the land that was promised to Abraham hundreds of years ago, and they're being led there by God himself in the form of a cloud and a pillar of fire by night, which is still the most metal thing I can think of. I love it. They should have no reason in the world to complain because of everything that they have gotten to experience that you and I likely are never going to. And yet, they still find a way to complain. See, here's the thing. The Hebrews are traveling in a desert environment, and I'm not going to pretend like I know what you know about a desert environment, but I will let you know this. Desert environments tend to be very dry. And the human body has this thing where if it doesn't get water in a certain amount of time period, it kind of stops being alive. So when we get to Exodus chapter 15, verse 22, it should make you just a little bit nervous about this group of people. It says, "Then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water." That's a problem. We're in a desert environment. We're walking everywhere that we go. It's been 3 days, and we have found no source of water whatsoever. And I'll remind you, too, that these folks had to leave Egypt in a hurry. So whatever supplies they've got, they're limited at best. Right? They're whatever they could grab on the way out. And I don't know how many of them thought, maybe we should fill up a jug with some water before we leave. And so the likelihood is they've been going days now without this water. And finally, they come to a water source in verse 23, but it's still not an ideal situation. Because it says, when they came to Marah, they could not drink the water of Marah because it was bitter. Therefore, it was named Marah. That's saying Marah 3 times in one verse. But maybe like me, as you read that verse, you're kind of thinking the same thing that I was, and that was, what makes water bitter? Like, why is that a problem here? Why is that the issue? If it doesn't taste quite, as crystal clear as the bottle of water that we've got in the refrigerator back in the fellowship hall, okay, but you still need water, so you need to drink it. Well, here's the thing. Again, when you're in a desert, any water source whatsoever is going to evaporate rather quickly. And water that you find in the wild, which is a weird sentence to make, it always contains within it various minerals and other elements that are denser than the water itself. And so as the water evaporates, those minerals and those elements, they become more condensed and concise into within there. And so the bitterness that they likely would have had would have been concentrated minerals, and that may have included sulfates. And if you don't know, if you have too much sulfate in high enough concentration, it can make you incredibly sick and could possibly lead to your end. So when it says that the water is bitter, it doesn't just mean it doesn't taste quite right. It means that it's water that could potentially kill you. And this is the only water source that they have come across in 3 days. And so what do? Well, we complain. Because it says in verse 24, "And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, 'What shall we drink?'" Now, Out of all of the complaining that we're going to talk about today, that's a fun sentence to say. This one is probably the most understandable, right? Again, the human body needs water in order to function and live. The water that we found we can't drink. So what are we supposed to do here? Right? We don't know where the next water source is. We don't know how long it's going to be before we can find it. And so they grumble enough to Moses that Moses himself actually goes to God. But I do want to point something out to you, because I think we tend to forget this as we read these texts, because we talked about it last week, but we kind of forget this. Who's leading them? Yeah. It's a pillar of cloud. Pillar of fire. God is right there. Now, I don't know that God would go through all of the effort of parting the Red Sea for you and wiping out the Egyptian army afterwards to just let you go and die of thirst in the desert. I don't believe that to be the case. And so when Moses comes to God and he brings this complaint before him, it says in verse 25, he cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a log, and he threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. I love the idea that God just like, as Moses brings his complaint, God's like, hey, come over here, check out this log. There's just a brief moment where Moses is like, yeah, I mean, it's a cool log, but what is that? So what? And God says, throw it in there. It's going to be wild. I like to watch the Instagram reels of like guys who throw things into water, or guys who throw chunks of ice onto frozen lakes. Something about that soothes me. I don't know why. And so Moses chucks this log into the water, and all of a sudden that water is now drinkable. And not only is it drinkable, it is sweet, meaning that it tastes good. Something about this particular log, God has just shown Moses not just a cool log. I love that idea. But he has shown him an early filtration of what water is. Like something about this log is able to filter out the minerals and the other sediment, and it makes this water drinkable. The people had a complaint, there's no water. God said, okay, and he gave them water. And not only that, but shortly after this, God actually takes them along on a journey, and a couple of days later, they find a wellspring, meaning there's a lot of fresh water. So when there was no water, now there is a ton of water. Now there's so much water that we are filling up every jug that we possibly can, because again, we don't know where the next water source is going to be. God has taken care of the issue. Problem solved, right? Well, for now, because it's not going to be too much longer before another problem presents itself in Exodus 16, verse 2. It says, and the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. Is anybody else noticing a pattern here? But this gets even worse, because when they explains their complaint, it actually says what they really have to say. And what they have to say is kind of wild. In verse 3, it says, and the people of Israel said to them, oh boy, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, where we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. This is twice. Twice. That the Israelites have now expressed they might have been better off staying in Egypt. I'll remind you, back in week 1 of this particular series, we concluded things with the Israelites crying out to God to liberate them from their slavery. That God would be the one to finally remove the burden of what they're going through. And now, here we are, just a few weeks away from them being liberated from their slavery. And twice, we've said we were better off in Egypt. Hey, our lives were miserable, but at least we had food. Okay. Verse 4, God responds to this particular newest complaint. And the way that God does is it's such a blessing. Verse 4 says this, then the Lord said to Moses, behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not. I'm going to rain bread. That is wild, right? He actually says a little bit further down there that because it's now evening and he's going to rain the bread in the morning, he says, I'm going to go ahead and send some meat your direction today. So you're still going to get something to eat today, but in the morning I'm going to rain fully cooked, totally ready to eat bread. All they got to do is go gather it. That's it. They don't got to process grain into flour. They don't got to take that flour and mix it up with oil. They don't have to bake anything. I got all of that. All you got to do is pick it up. There's a problem that we don't have any food, and God says, okay, I'm going to give you fully cooked food every single day except for the Sabbath. So the day before, gather twice as much. When Moses relays this information to the people, when he tells them that, hey, God is about to bless you in a way that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, he says something really interesting that I don't think we should overlook in verses 7 and 8. It says, and in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us? And Moses said, when the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumbling, that you grumble against him. What are we? Your grumbling is not against us, it is against the Lord. He lets them know that God is sending meat there tonight, that the morning there's going to be bread, but he also makes sure to mention to them that when they complain about their situation, when they complain about what's going on around them, they're not complaining about Moses and Aaron. Remember, Moses and Aaron are little more than just representatives, right? When you go to the restaurant and the waitress has to tell you, hey, I'm sorry, but things are running slow, and you complain to the waitress, you're not complaining about the waitress, you're complaining about the cooking staff. Right? The waitress doesn't have any control over that. When you go to the grocery store and they have a new policy where they've got to scan something and it makes you mildly inconvenienced and you complain to the cashier, it's not the cashier's fault. She's just doing her job. Moses makes sure to let them know, you're not complaining about us. You're complaining about God. And I think there's probably two reasons why Moses says this particular thing, and I think it's important for us to look at those two reasons. The first one is maybe because he doesn't want to hear their complaining when it's not his fault, right? I spent a lot of time in youth ministry, and I would get complained about things that I had nothing to do with, right? I more than once, I got complained, I can't believe that Brandon did this, and I wasn't even in the building when that had happened. And in fact, most of the time, those complaints were really about my senior minister, but they complained to me, or about me. Fortunately, we don't have that problem here, because if there is something that you have to complain about, it likely is Brad's fault, so... So just direct all your complaints to Brad. But I don't think that's the only reason why Moses does this. I think Moses is also pointing out to the idea to them that God is blessing us with this stuff. God didn't have to give us this bread from heaven. He didn't have to provide us with water. God could have very easily said, hey, I liberated you. I wiped out your enemies. Figure it out. Right? He could have done anything like that. God did not have to give them manna from heaven. And not only is this manna from heaven coming down with no effort on the Israelites' part at all, this stuff is actually pretty good. See, God could have probably sent them down a flavorless puck that would have taken care of all their nutritional needs, something like a Soylent Green, which if you get that reference, we should probably hang out more. But instead, verse 31 tells us something incredible. It says, now the house of Israel called its name manna. It was like coriander seed, white, and its taste of it was like wafers made with honey. It's not only there to be nutritional, it also tastes good. And it kind of makes sense that God would do that. I mean, he designed taste buds. So, he knows that there's something, it's worth getting excited about your food, is it not? That's why I do the pulled pork mac and cheese with crispy jalapenos on top. And God gave me the taste buds. I'm not going to let them go to waste. But this is what God does. He blesses them in the midst of their complaining. He gives them something that doesn't require any effort on their part. And Moses still warns them, hey, maybe don't complain. Because you're complaining to God, not to us. But of course we're not done. Because why would we be done? Because again, we're going to find something else to complain about, because once again, we're in a desert environment. Eventually we need water again. In Exodus 17, verse 2, not verse 2. Where am I? Oh, okay, yeah. In Exodus 17, verse 2, Moses again calls out what they're doing. It says, therefore the people quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. And Moses said to them, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you test the Lord? This is a huge question, is it not? Once again, these people are coming with a complaint. And once again, Moses tells them, you're not complaining about me. You're complaining about God, who has blessed you with liberation, with freedom, with water, with food, and now you're still complaining. And so God once more gives them water in another miraculous way. This time he doesn't take bitter water and turn it into drinkable by throwing a rock in it or a log in it. That's fun. Instead, he tells Moses, take your staff, and you see that rock over there? Go for a grand slam. And Moses says, what's a grand slam? And God says, don't worry about it. Just hit it. And water starts gushing out of a rock. And not just a little water, enough water to satiate the thirst of everyone there, to fill up the coffers and to keep them going forward. Out of a rock! I'm going to go home and I'm going to hit a rock with see what happens. Why not? Probably me if we're honest. But once again, they have complained that God wasn't going to help them, and again, God has blessed them to see their needs fulfilled. One more time, these people have whined and griped and complained, and God has said, okay, I got you. But look what happens when they name this place in verse 7, and this is wild. And he being Moses, called the name of that place Massah and Meribah because of the quarreling of the people of Israel and because they tested the Lord by saying, is the Lord among us or not? Wow! Who's leading them? How? Cloud, fire. Is God with us? The audacity to ask that question. My goodness. And I wish we were done. I wish we were done. But we're not. Because of course we're not. Because eventually, after day of eating fresh bread that has rained down from the heavens that tastes like wafers made with honey, I'm getting a little tired of that. Because when we fast forward in the narrative to Numbers 11, they get tired of the manna. In verses 4 through 6, it says, now the rabble, I love that word, rabble. Can we bring that back, please? It's such a great word. Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving. And the people of Israel also wept again. They wept again. We're complaining to the point of weeping. Awesome. And said, oh, that we had meat to eat. Oh my goodness. We remember the fish we ate in, say it with me, Egypt. That cost nothing. The cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our strength is dried up. What? I'm having trouble not vomiting as I read this. And there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. This manna that appears every morning with no effort on our part whatsoever. It just rains down because God loves us so much. I'm so tired of it. These people, for the third time now, We are once again saying that our lives under the foot of the Egyptians was better than being free to go to the land that God promised our ancestors. You have got to be kidding me. Never mind that they've had every need, again, need, not want, met miraculously. It's not good enough for them. Never mind that God has blessed them literally every morning. It's not good enough for them. And this time, after the third time they've said their lives were better in Egypt, God decides He's had enough of their complaining. And He's going to make them pay for that complaint. Because He has richly blessed them literally every day. And they're still complaining about it. And so finally, in verses 18 through 20, we read this, and say this to the people, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat. For you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, who will give us meat to eat? For it was better for us in Egypt. That's how I read it. I don't know how you read it. Therefore, the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall not eat just 1 day, or 2 days, or 5 days, or 10 days, or 20 days, but a whole month until it comes out of your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you. Because you've rejected the Lord who is among you and have wept before Him, saying, why did we come out of Egypt? You want meat? Oh, you're going to get meat. Right? This is kind of like if you were one of those kids who got caught smoking a cigarette by your parent and your dad says, cool, you're going to smoke this whole carton. You want to do it? I'm going to make you sick of it. You want meat? I'll give you some meat. Not only that, because again, God has given them nothing but blessings in this entire experience. He has given them the blessing of being spared from at least a few of the plagues that we're aware of. He has given them the blessing of finally being liberated out of their slavery. He has given them the blessing of wiping out the Egyptian army in front of them. He has given them the blessing of food every single morning. He has given them the blessing of water where there is no water. And they still complain. And not only is God going to give them enough meat to make them sick, He's going to do something else that is going to have far more long-stretching consequences. Verses 33 and 34 of Numbers 11 says, while the meat was yet between their teeth before it was consumed, the anger of the Lord was kindled against the people, and the Lord struck down the people with a very great plague. Oof. Therefore, the name of that place was called Kibroth Havada, because there they buried the people who had the craving. God had enough of their complaining. Every parent reaches that point where when the kid whines enough, we react. Right, Mom? Right, Dad? Just me? Okay, cool. Now I feel like a terrible father. Thanks, everybody. No, God had had enough of their complaining. They complained that they didn't have drinkable water. God made drinkable water. They complained they didn't have any food. God gave them not just bread, but very good tasting bread every single morning. They complained that they didn't have enough water. God brought more water out of a stinking rock. And it's still not good enough. All along this entire journey, God has been blessing these people over and over and over again, and they still find things to complain about, because at a certain point, that blessing of manna, it becomes ordinary to them, and once it becomes ordinary, we can complain about it now. God was glad to bless His people. He was. I firmly believe that. I don't think He'd have done it if He wasn't glad to do it. But when they no longer saw it as a blessing, they grumbled, they whined, and they complained, which was spitting in the face of God Himself. When we complain about trivial matters, That's exactly what we're doing. We're spitting in the face of God himself. Because God has blessed each and every one of our lives incredibly richly. And I know that sometimes our lives don't really feel like blessings, but I promise you, if you're still sucking in air, God is blessing you. You got to stop and look for it sometimes. But if you ate today, or if you're going to eat today, that's a blessing. If you had drinkable water today, that's a blessing. If you woke up this morning, that's a blessing. If you are seated next to somebody who cares about you, whether that's a loved one, a friend, or a sibling, or whatever, that's a blessing. And when we complain about those things, we're complaining about the blessing of God. If that makes you uncomfortable, good. It should. And here's the thing, we show this in the way that we treat the church as well. If someone says something or does something that we don't like, we cry foul. And we either head to the next church down the street or we leave the faith entirely. Now, before I go deep down this rabbit hole, because we're going to go down this rabbit hole because it's a fun rabbit hole, I want to be absolutely crystal clear with you, okay? And I want you to hear me when I say this. There are good reasons to leave a church. If the doctrine that is being preached goes against Scripture, run. If the person who's standing in the pulpit starts saying things that are very manipulative of Scripture, run. If there is no accountability in the leadership of that church, run. But most of the complaints, and I've been doing this now for almost 20 years, that's wild. Most of the complaints that I've heard within the church, some of the reasons I've heard why people have left churches, not about doctrine, not about scriptural manipulation, not about leadership accountability. I've heard all kinds of different reasons, from the new people sat in my usual spot and nobody corrected them. And this is going to sound ridiculous, but they stopped carrying the hazelnut creamer I like in the coffee area. Looked me right in the eyes when he said it too. I just walked away. I didn't, what am I supposed to say to that? Well, I'm glad that we carry that. Please. Most of the complaints that we do in the church are over things that we really are blessings. It's a blessing if your church has a coffee hour, let alone if they've got the hazelnut creamer. It's a blessing that your church has new people coming into it. If a new person walked in today, by all means, take my usual seat. I sit in the front. It's a little more padded than I think everybody else is because nobody ever sits in the front. When I say it's the best seat in the house, I mean that literally. Like, it is the most... But we complain. Let me give you a little perspective. Can I do that? No, I've got the microphone, so I'm going to. In our nation, we are allowed to gather freely, to worship loudly, and to do so without fear. There are Christians in this world today who wish that they could gather freely, who wish that they could worship loudly, who wish that they could join together without fear. Look at what's happening in Nigeria right now. My goodness, it's a massacre. Why? Because people have the audacity to claim the name of Jesus Christ. You and I get to do that every week. We get to be together every week. I look forward. Having slides is a blessing. And yet most of the things that we complain about are born out of the blessings that God has given us. But we don't treat them like blessings. Why? Because we've gotten used to them. And so once they become ordinary, they're no longer a blessing. It's something that we can whine about. It's something that we complain about. It's something that we can nitpick over and over and over and over and over again. Man. We take the blessing of the simple act of gathering to worship together for granted all the time. I look forward to seeing all of you on Sunday. I get hyped. I have trouble going to sleep on Saturday night because I'm looking forward to seeing you today. I get excited about that because I can. I'm blessed in a way to be able to come together with all of you great people. I love each and every one of you. If it's your first Sunday with us, I love you. If it's your millionth Sunday with us, I love you, Ray.
I just got old.
But we tend to take these blessings for granted all the time. We need to be more cautious about the things that we complain about. We do, because when we complain about these things that are blessing, again, there are good reasons to complain about the church. If you hear me say something that goes against Scripture, by all means, bring it to the attention of leadership. I met with the young adult small group on Friday. I had a blast, by the way. I hope you guys did too, because I had a lot of fun. It made me feel young again. But we were talking about how does the church function? How does the church govern? Because oftentimes in church leadership, we don't think about that. We don't think, hey, these kids who've grown up in the church, they know how the church works. No, they don't. And so we talked about that, and I told them, and I'll tell you the same exact thing. Don't assume that leadership knows what the problem is, right? I told them this too. At Johnson University, I skipped the divine intervention class. I'm so sorry. My alarm didn't go off. And so I don't know how to just have God directly beam things into my brain. So if there's a problem that's going on, an actual legitimate problem going on, please by all means bring it to our attention. But, if it's a problem with leadership or doctrine, yes, bring that to our attention. If it's not, then can I challenge you with a thought? If you see something that could be improved, instead of complaining about it or choosing to leave the church over it, step up and help out. When my daughters complain about something for long enough, I'll let them complain for a while. I will. I'll let them complain. But eventually I ask them a question. Don't I, Robin? Yeah. What's the question? Oh, come on, I just had to say this to you not too long ago, little lady. The question is this: what are you going to do about it? Because complaining never does anything to solve a problem. It doesn't. If anything, it makes the situation worse because now you're annoying me in the process too. Complaining never does anything to solve a problem. Serving does. Stepping up and helping in those areas solves the problem. You don't like that we don't have hazelnut creamer in the coffee hour? Go buy it. We'll reimburse you for that. How about that? This church, we don't really have a coffee hour, so if you think we should have a coffee hour, by all means, come make coffee. I would love that. That'd be fantastic. Hey, I don't like the fact that we got kids in the area. Why don't you go serve in the kids' area, see why we do this? Complaining doesn't solve anything. It doesn't. I'm sorry, it doesn't. Serving solves everything. Because now you've taken a problem and you've taken ownership of it. And here's the best part of this. When you serve instead of complain, you grow in your faith. Right? We look most like Jesus himself when we serve the people that are around us. And here's the other thing, and please, this is 20 years of hearing complaints, so please, I say this with love. I really do. I really, really say this with love. You're not going to believe me, but I say this with love. If it's not worth you stepping up to serve in, keep your mouth shut. If it's not important enough to you to step up and serve in it, then maybe don't complain. Because when you do, you're just complaining about the blessing that God has given you. Again, I say that with love. Because complaining doesn't solve anything. All it does is spit in the face of God for the blessings that he has chosen to give you specifically. And so Christians, instead of complaining, let's serve each other. Let's find ways where I want this church, and I said this Friday too, I want this church to be the best it can possibly be. I want to see this church, I want to see what a church looks like that's firing on all cylinders. That every person is seeking to fill a gap if there's a gap that they notice. I want to see that church. You know why? Because that church is on fire. Because God is doing incredible things in the midst of those people. Because they are taking the blessings that God has given them, and they're, instead of complaining about it, they're running with them. They're giving thanks to God all the time for the ways that he has richly, and folks, I mean it, richly blessed us. Because complaining solves nothing. Serving solves everything. The Apostle Paul would write in Philippians chapter 2, verses 14 through 16, and we will close with it today. Do all things without grumbling or disputing. I really thought about just stopping right there. But here, I think we need this next part, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world, holding fast to the word of life, so that in the day of Christ I may be proud that I did not run in vain or labor in vain.